Okay, so I'm gonna do passage 10. I'm gonna model the car strategy for you all. And you will be able to access this later within the system to, if you want to review it at another time. So first up, I'm gonna make sure I have a paper to take notes, and I'm going to do the first step. First step is figuring out refer or not. So is this a passage that I would choose to do for myself? Now, looking at this passage, I see a lot of questions that are pretty short. Yeah, none of those questions seem too long. This one's kind of a little bit long, but it's not super long. So I feel pretty confident at least approaching that. Looking at these paragraphs, the lengths of the paragraphs aren't too long. This one again is a little bit longer, but they're not super duper long. And I see a lot of Zervanite, Zoroastrian, like I see a lot of Z's, which is not necessarily something I often see. But because of that, I feel like this is something that's going to be a little bit lighter reading, a little bit easier. Zoroaster, I don't really know too much about, heard of it, but like I don't know very much about it, but I'm not super invested or interested in it. I can look a little bit further down here. It says Zoroastrian's religious beliefs and practices. I know that with religious beliefs and practices, I can have a pretty neutral opinion about it and still get something done. So I feel pretty confident attempting this passage. So this is one that I don't think I would refer out, I would attempt to do. So then I'm going to actually check the chart, look at the questions, figure out what I'm going to be looking at this passage for in the first place. So looking at question number 161, the question says, author said Zoroastrianism, both humans and two primal spirits. So I'm going to put human, H-U-M, and then I'm going to put two prime spirit. I'm taking notes. So when I get to the passage and I see something about a humans versus two prime spirit, I know I am going to take pay extra attention here, take more notes than other places because I know there's a question that's relying on me understanding this. Question number 2, it's discovered Zervanites, blah, 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 discovery, support author's argument. So I have no idea what the author's argument is, so can't do anything with this question. Just going to take note that I'm going to have to get an understanding of the author's argument. So I'll just take off argument question mark. Number 3, which discovery, if genuine, would weaken author's argument? So again, author's argument. So I know I need to look at the author's argument for sure, for sure. There's at least 2 questions requiring that. Then question number 4, passage indicates which of the following statements must be true. Again, I'm gonna have to read those statements. So I can't do much about that, but I know I'm gonna need to like look at that. And that's a really specific question I can like narrow down just by using the passage. Question number 5, Orphic Greeks, blah, blah, blah. Similarity between this theory and Zervanism could not have resulted from the influence of, okay, so theory similarities, and then why, question mark. So maybe there's something in the passage that's going to talk about potential reasons or hypotheses why other people could have also developed Zervanite, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But just taking notes to begin. And then question number 6, in response to objection of individuals, they could decide anything. Author argues designated decision makers could decide anything. The response is, I have no idea. So again, author's argument. So it sounds like I'm really going to have to focus on the author's argument to be able to approach this passage. Now I'm going to go take and put a line in my notes and then go on the other side and actually write some stuff down or be aware, go through this passage. Now I'm going to actually enter the room. I am oriented myself to what tasks I need to get completed here. I do think I'm going to have to take a little bit more note of the author's tone, the author's main points or multiple main points if there are them, because there are a lot of questions that are focusing on that and will probably help me eliminate incorrect answers. So paragraph number 1, a fundamental sense, every person morally responsible, what's right and wrong, act accordingly. fundamental sense. So off top, that's a really strong word. So I'm just going to highlight it as like the author believes very strongly about this sentence. They're morally responsible. Responsibility is uncomfortable, and you may should be rid of it, pass it on to somebody else. So everybody responsible for doing what's right. And I'm not writing that. I just put everybody, and then RESP, responsible, the number 4, doing right. And I'm gonna, instead of right, I just put a smiley face. And then I'm gonna put a dash and say some don't like it. So then paragraph 2, responsibility is not transferable. Can't get rid of it. So to say I promise to obey Fred, moral attempt to forfeit your autonomy. After all, say you had someone else's you had enslaved your will to somebody else's puppet. So this person like really believes very strongly about this. Fortunately, it is not possible. Fortunately, you can't get rid of it. So the author likes that. So can't get rid of responsibility. I'm writing as a note. RESPONS. And then I'm going to put author smiley face because the author thinks that's a good thing. Having made a promise to obey, one is still, in fact, free to obey or disobey, to keep or keep that promise. You still get to do what you want. Do what you want. So in paragraph 3, now, although it may seem bizarre to talk about Fred obeying no matter what, it does follow. You may not say, I'll obey the government even if you do wrong. Okay, you could not hand over your autonomy willy-nilly to the federal government. You were told to do something, examine if it is right or wrong. Okay, so have to make own decision of right or wrong. Make own And I'm starting to see a pattern arise where the author is saying something in one sentence, blah, 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 blah. It does follow, but then the author says a whole lot of absolutely nothing in the middle of the paragraph and then comes back to saying something. So now I'm going to assume in the middle of the paragraph, I can just kind of go blah, 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 skim through it and keep trucking and really focus on the beginning and end of the paragraph. He might switch it up, or he or she might switch it up. So I'm still going to have to keep a little bit of attention, but I can also anticipate that I don't need to read every single word of the rest of this passage. Therefore, government requires moral person to act particular fashion, person complies, person believes the right thing to do. Government requires a particular behavior, important factor taking into account, final arbiter is the individual. So government, so I'm gonna put G-O-V apostrophe T, can do what it can say what it wants. People gotta comply. Then no government, nobody, people, no position, no individual can have moral authority over any other individual. Nobody's in charge. That's like just one sentence, so I just put that with paragraph 4, but I could argue that it's a different paragraph. Just for each sentence, I put it with paragraph 4. Then, of course, responsible individual have taken into account what other individuals doing, individual blah, 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 government degree, everyone driving on the left, blah, 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 blah. It's the fact people driving on the left frequently, the company, not the fact that government requires it. So, gotta think about others. Not because the government requires it, but just gotta think about others. And so then paragraph 6, but I will say a little about one particular peculiar objection, distrust of individual conscience. Okay. Imagine someone throwing up a pan. You cannot let people decide what's right and wrong. They decide, but if I start noise, that person can come to me too. Since someone has to decide, what's right, it might as well be me. It morally has to be me. I'm in charge of me morally. This author really has a lot of this like morals and fundamentals and stuff. So I'm gonna just highlight the word morally because the author like really believes this is true to his core, to their core. Then paragraph 7, last paragraph. Government's made up of individuals fundamentally similar to me, and heirs human applies to everybody. Sometimes the government claims to have access to blah, 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 blah. Certainly, if you're ignorant, consult an expert. When to consult, who to consult, decide between conflicting interests is still an individual problem, and so is the final decision. So, who you become is on you. We all make mistakes. Okay, so now that I have listened to the patient, I've entered the room, gone through the passage, I'm going to take a summarizing encounter and then go ahead and answer these questions or attempt these questions. So just looking at my summaries and paragraphs, I've got everybody's responsible for doing right. Some people don't like it, but you can't get rid of the responsibility. You gotta make your own decision. The government can say what it wants. The people gotta choose. Nobody's in charge. Gotta think about other people. I'm in charge of me. Who you become is on you. So overall, I'm gonna put people make choices to become who they are. Not easy, but required. So my summarizing is just people are going to make choices to become who they are. Those choices are not easy, but they are required. The tone the author has, he's pretty like passionate about what he believes. He's definitely positive, like he affirmatively believes these things. He's not speaking negatively about it. So that's the summary that I have, and I'm going to use all of these notes to help me, to help me attempt to answer these questions. First up, question number 1 is going back to this whole humans versus 2 primal spirits. I don't remember those words being mentioned anywhere in this passage, but I just read the whole wrong passage, and this is absolutely an MCAT thing that would happen. I was really much so confused. I got all this Zoroastrianism thing and then read a different passage. Okay. So, since I read the wrong passage, I already have notes for a different passage. I have no idea what's going on with these questions. This is like real life, honestly. Um, we are going to attempt to do questions from passage number 11. See how it goes. So, before I even do that, I want to adjust my expectation of myself. That passage itself wasn't that bad, but I still have not looked at these questions. So I don't know if these questions are going to be bad and then like how much effort or energy I should be spending on these questions. So that's a pretty easy question. Chill, kind of chill. Okay, so I know I'm not horribly just lost in the sauce. I can get started somewhere. So let's just look at them. In response to objection, if individuals obeyed consciences, they could decide anything. The author argues designated decision makers could decide anything too. Okay, cool. Individuals obey conscience, they could decide anything. The people who supposed to make the conscience could decide anything too. This response is the authors already said that they could also decide to do whatever they want. It's in the individual persons. So I think it is relevant. I just don't know for why it is relevant. So I'm not about to like eliminate certain things because relevant versus irrelevant. I'm gonna look at these explanations for relevant before I move on from there. Relevant objector does not state politicians are better decision makers than other individuals. Well, designated decision maker and then jumping to politician. I don't know if those are necessarily the same thing. Gotta talk a little bit about the government, but that's not necessarily the designated. It could be like that Fred person they were talking about. So I don't think it's going to be C. Because author implies politicians ought to obey their consciences too. Obey their conscience. I have no idea what that means. So I'm gonna just leave that one alone for right now. So then looking at the other ones, irrelevant. The objector does not imply people should be forced to disobey their consciences. Okay. The I have no idea really what that one's saying. Irrelevant, the author states responsibility is often an uncomfortable burden. I don't think that that would make it irrelevant. I don't, so like, I think that would make it relevant. The author states the responsibility is uncomfortable and anybody could decide anything. I don't think those necessarily go together. So I think it's either between A or D. Also, again, I know this is like of this passage, this is a question I'm not about to be spending a whole lot of time doing. I'm gonna just do what I can and move on. So I don't know, haven't even decided if it's relevant or not. Irrelevant, the objector does not imply people should be forced to obey. Relevant, author implies politicians ought to obey their consciences too. Author implies politicians obey their consciences, ought to obey their conscience. It talks about that whole like moral situation. It has to be, but I have no idea. I'm about to just go 50-50 on this one. Wow. See, I have no idea what I was doing on this one. And I'm glad I didn't spend a whole lot of time working through that question because I really had no idea what was going on. Politicians are better decision makers than our other individuals. Yeah, I will review that later, maybe. But again, wasn't holding very much weight on getting through this one. Less these questions, however, maybe more. Suppose there are some people psychologically incapable of breaking promises. Okay, they are psychologically incapable of breaking a promise. So if you promise Fred, the whole thing that's relevant is the whole person talking about if you promise Fred something, that doesn't mean you have to do what Fred says. You can do whatever you want. But some people can't. So there, this is going to go against what the author's point is from paragraph 2, where like you have to be free. So it goes against it. So it challenges the author. I don't think it supports the author's assertion. I think it challenges the author's assertion. It's impossible to surrender responsibility. I do think that that goes along with paragraph 2. I think those go together. Challenges the assertion that in decision making, other people matter. I don't think it's about the other people mattering part. I think it's way more about this paragraph 2 situation as to why it's correct. Does anybody have questions about how I got through that one? Well, actually, no. I'm gonna just go through all these and then we'll talk about questions. So, okay. Question number 3, which belief would be most in agreement with the theme of the passage? So this is where I'm just gonna look for which answer choice goes with my main idea the most. Laws have no legitimacy in as far as they accord with the will, except insofar as they accord with the will of the governed. Okay, so I don't know, people are gonna make choices. It's not easy, but it's required. It's not so much focusing on the law as everything else. So that's not wrong. I just don't think the focus was on the law. So I'm gonna keep it around until I find something better. Laws are necessary. Okay, so now I'm seeing all of these answers talk about laws and lawmakers. So, okay, I guess this one has a little bit more relevancy now that they're all talking about laws. And it's becoming a little better of an option. B, laws are necessary to prevent people from deciding moral issues for themselves. Like, absolutely not. The author is saying like the exact opposite. People are still going to do what they want. Laws should be obeyed. Obedience promotes order and so is generally beneficial. Like, the author does talk about order and like benefit of society, general benefit. I don't know if it's necessarily because of like law obedience though, because it's saying that they're doing it not because of the laws, because they just should. Lawmakers consult experts rather than rely on their own fallible judgment. I don't think an expert is still, everyone's an expert in their own life. So unless a law is going to go with what my is, people aren't going to follow the law, is really what I think it is. Okay, question number 4. It's been demonstrated government officials are 10,000 times more likely than private citizens to reach a correct decision on moral issues. A correct decision on moral issues is like where I have a problem with this. If I'm thinking about as the author, like what is a correct moral decision? It depends on the person. You could do whatever you want. So I don't know that it's really supporting anything, but we'll see what these answers are even saying. Sports assertion, deciding between conflicting experts is the problem of the individual. I don't think it's about the conflicting experts. Nobody said a governmental official is an expert about something. Assertion, when told to do something, an individual must examine it to see if it's right or wrong. I don't think I don't think that's a good answer choice, but I don't know what's a bad answer choice. It's just kind of irrelevant. So we're just gonna hold off on that one. Challenging assertions, since someone has to decide the right thing, it might as well be the individual. It does challenge the assertion that somebody has to decide what's right for the individual. Because it's saying somebody's going to choose what's right, correct. So I do like C feels more relevant than B. So just because of that, I'm going to eliminate B as an answer choice. And then D, challenging assertion, responsibility is an uncomfortable burden the person doesn't want to have. I think this would go with why you would let a governmental official make the decision instead of you. So it wouldn't necessarily, that like kind of goes against each other. So if I was between B and C, I would still choose C because I like C more, but I could see if B is correct. Okay. Then the last question. Countries, the law says drive on the left, people will find it beneficial to drive on the left, side on the right, find it beneficial to drive on the right. That fact, it does not have anything to do with it. The law says it's this, generally find this. It's not necessarily because of the law. It's just saying there's a relationship, not necessarily a causation. So I don't know if it supports the general thesis. It doesn't, it's not contrary, I'll tell you that much. I don't think it directly supports the thesis, which is, and even if I don't remember the thesis, the one that I chose would be the thesis is laws have no legitimacy unless it's accorded with the will of the governed. So I think that's it. A law is only legitimate if people want to drive on the left. So I don't think, so I guess the law could be made because the people already thought it was beneficial. It's not necessarily saying which came first. So I know it's not contrary. I'm still going to get rid of that one. Indicates it requires modification. I don't think it's neutral. So it's either modifying it or it's supporting it. I really don't know, but I don't feel like I need to spend very much time here. The law says to drive on the right. People find it beneficial. People make choices. It's not. Okay. Well, it is neutral. So people drive on different sides unchanged. Okay, so I was doing too much of like thinking about it, correlation versus causation. That's what led me into jumping to a conclusion. I was just thinking about the law says, then people find it beneficial. If then. And so because this is a fact, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. This is about the law. Like these are just showing two things that are going together. And so we don't know which one came first. So that's really why it doesn't have anything to do with this central thesis in the main point of the passage. And that concludes it. So